Welcome to Anarchy without Capitalism. I am, for all intents and purposes, I'm Jacob Zolt.
I'm Delikta.
And, we decided that we just wanted to present our preference, our vision for, the kind of possibilities for anarchy without capitalism, since we know so many people here are, they had capitalism, yay! And me and Dylan are like, capitalism, that's so much. So that's kind of what we want to do. You want to just tell our personal stories, introduce ourselves?
Yeah, might as well. You can go first, that's fine.
Alright, so I kind of was a philosophy major in college, kind of politically ignorant, and just wanted to get to know what politics was about. I'd never understood Republican, Democrat stuff. And so I wanted to know more, so I started listening to talk radio. And I didn't like Rush Limbaugh, but I found another conservative talk radio guy who I kind of liked and kind of got into his thing, and so I guess I was kind of conservative at that point. And as I kind of went that path, I just kept reading. I started reading Milton Friedman, and then from Milton Friedman I read Rothbard. And so at that point I was kind of feeling I was like a libertarian. And then after, and I got more and more into Rothbard, I'm like, well, this anarcho-capitalism stuff is pretty cool. I'm really digging the Rothbard. And then I was probably doing the ANCAP thing for about 2 years, and then about a year ago, I began to get anarcho-curious. Being a philosophy major, I was like, I gotta understand the other side. Like, I need to get in their head because I feel like we could work together. I feel like, there's got to be some synergy there, and there's got to be misunderstandings, and so I wanted to understand what do they not like about capitalism. So I just started, getting to know some of them, and I started reading lots of more books. Started with Proudhon and Bakunin and Kropotkin, and just Malatesta, and just got into Stirner and de Cleyre and Goldman and Berkman, and just went crazy. And for the last year, I feel like I've just been on this crazy research binge of I just need to read and read and read. And somewhere along the line, I went from anarcho-curious to like, no, I'm digging this. I am loving the flavor of anarchy that's going on here, and I want more of it. And my personal position now, I'm like what's called an anarchist without adjectives, which means I just think all the flavors of anarchy are delicious, and I love it all. But if you want, I can put on. I know probably what's interesting people probably here, I'm guessing, would be anarcho-communism. And since Dylan's kind of handling the anarcho-socialism, mutualism part, if you want me to put on my red hat, I can do that. That's cool. And so that's my personal kind of deal.
All right, so I started off.
Now, what's your name?
My name's Dylan Delikta. All right. I started off actually. I read Ayn Rand's book Atlas Shrugged in high school. That's what kind of started making me question. And then I was still a little bit more neoconservative at the time because I was introduced into politics watching like Glenn Beck and listening to Rush Limbaugh because my parents really loved that stuff. So as I started questioning a little bit more, I noticed oh, hey, I'm libertarian, and then one of my mom's friends from school that she works at was like, oh, he's a libertarian. So he gave me a book, Restoring the American Dream by Robert J. Ringer. And I was like, oh, this is neat. So I found out a lot of big names through that. Started watching Stossel, and then Jeffrey Tucker was on a Stossel episode that I had watched and came upon the Mises.org. And so I was like, okay, cool. And then I started reading some stuff from there, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm an anarchist. It took me about maybe 4 months at the time. And so I was voluntarist for maybe a couple of years. And then I think what ended up starting to change that was I read a book from Wendy McElroy. I think it was, what was it called? Was it The Art of Not Being Governed? Or no, that's his website.
Scott.
I forget what it's, The Art of Living Free or something like that.
Okay.
And it had talked about the labor movement and stuff, and how she's like, oh yeah, it was libertarian at the time in the early 19th century and things like that. And it also piqued my interest into feminism too. At one time though, I was like, why are social anarchists not down with market anarchists? And I was emailing Gary Charté at the time, and he was like, well, you just gotta give a chance to listen to their arguments, and even just listen to mutualist arguments too. And I was like, oh, you know what, I need to actually do that. And as I read more, I just slowly became more of a mutualist, and right now I'm at a neo-Credonian mutualist, which is what Sean P. Wilbur writes about a lot on his blogs. He's got a whole bunch of blogs, so if you ever get a chance, go to the libertarianlabyrinth.org and you'll find a lot of classic anarchist literature.
It's called Libertarian Labyrinth?
Yeah, libertarian/labyrinth.org. I think it also connects to all of his certain blogs. One's talking about Proudhon, one's talking about Bakunin. Some of it is the red and black feminist history of the early French period. He's got one talking about some of his ideas. That's Contran. Really cool stuff if you're interested in those theories. So you can go ahead and talk about. That's my journey a little bit.
We plan on starting with some definitions to give you an idea of our context, where we're coming from.
Yeah, tell us how it's different from like anarcho-capitalism and how it's different than voluntarism, although it's hard for me to define that.
We, like the left anarchist, known it by right libertarians, what's known as left anarchy, it has a little bit different definition of capitalism, or a different understanding. They see capitalism from a historical point of view, beginning with with Marx. Marx used capitalism as a pejorative. It was like a bad word, a dirty word. And then it was rescued later, by the Austrian economists and stuff. Said, well, no, there's actually good reason to think that capitalism is good. That the capitalist entrepreneur actually contributes to the production process. And it's kind of like in a refutation of what Marx was using as the pejorative. They're saying, well, no, actually there's some good here. Whereas Marx was saying, no, the capitalist is like exploiting from the laborer, and he's got this whole theory to justify that. So the left anarchists are are using that old definition for capitalism, not the new, revised, rehabilitated version of capitalism from the Austrian or neoclassical economists. The anarchists are using the one where it's like capitalism is like private property, and private property is very attached to like state legal rights, state legal privilege, and this is always associated with wage laborer.
So they think that it requires state privilege. Go on.
Yes, for left anarchists, our view is that the state and capitalism are together.
I see.
That you need a state to have capitalism, and but not all states are capitalistic. But if you're going to have capitalism, you need authority, you need power to protect the legal right of private property. And you can't.
Capitalism means without government, free enterprise, right?
That's how we define it. That's how we
That's the
define it.
definition of it.
That would
we
be
define it.
Some people I have heard that definition, but that's I mean, like you could go to any place. I mean, I'm not sure where you'd find that definition other than people like in the anarcho-capitalist field.
Yeah.
Any other person is going to say, well, capitalism doesn't have to do with government at
So
all.
do these-
Capitalism, the standard definition is the private control of industry and trade.
That's a standard
definition.
Do the mutualists or left anarchists do they deny that anarcho-capitalism is possible? Is that what they're saying?
There's an interesting article by Anna Morgenstern that says anarcho-capitalism is impossible, and then basically her argument is that if you're an anarcho-capitalist, what you really are is an anarchist, and you're going to get rid of anarchism eventually. You know what I mean? You just see capitalism as a way of deregulating the state or deconstructing the state. But then as soon as you get rid of the state, then it's going to kind of become something more social, that the people are going to cooperate. If you're going to have no state, then people are naturally going to want to cooperate, and if they're doing cooperation, then you're going to see equalization, because she's saying that what you see as disparities of wealth now are all due to state power.
And when did she write this? Because like, have these people read the great books by Morris and Linda Tannehill, Market for Liberty?
Yeah, they have.
Dealt with that? Okay.
They have. In fact, Marx actually, from what I've read, wasn't the originator of capitalism as a pejorative. It was Thomas Hodgkins, who is known as a Ricardian socialist. A lot of socialism, early when it starts out answering the social question, starts because people read the classical economists Adam Smith and David Ricardo, due to their not only their labor theory of value, but of just how they attacked some of the mercantilist periods. Because capitalism was not a word at the time, but you could see the state through its history kind of favoring capitalists over laborers and peasants and things like that.
How does Carson and a left anarchist, how do they deal with the question that Mises used to basically dump Marx, which is there is no way to do any kind, because valuation does not exist.
Economic calculation problem?
Mises basically refutes Marx by saying, unless you have pricing, you cannot have an efficient market, because there's no way to calculate at all.
If you have a state,
and remember, Mises does not believe in valuation at all. And you know the difference. Valuation is trying to say, put a number on something and say, this plastic cup is a 2.5 and this container is a 2.7. Mises would say, no, you cannot value. You can only rank.
Right.
That I prefer this
one.
In this nanosecond, I prefer this one now because I'm thirsty.
Yes, sure.
So he would say, without a pricing mechanism, you have problems. So how do they deal with the pricing?
So human action, he actually deals with, Mises actually talks about this. He says that you can't, if the state controls everything, then you're not getting prices because the state is the only producer, and it's not accepting consumer price signals as what consumers want. So you're never gonna get to a market equilibrium of producing what the consumers want, in an efficient kind of way. So you have this problem.
So you understand?
So Mises says, but he goes, but if the workers' syndicates, if workers were to have syndicates, and that's what we mean by socialism, if workers have syndicates and they own their own means of production, and you have at least 2 syndicates, then there's no economic calculation problem there because they own their own stuff.
So there
getting
is,
pricing from each
because
other.
the other thing about Mises is he defined ownership, and this is really important, and this is why a communal ownership is always presenting a problem. Mises said in ownership, he actually said people really do not own objects. Mises actually said this. Even though I might consider this cup my property, Mises is basically saying, for example, who really can own a book or an idea? Because when you sell a book, the idea is out there. And so Mises, what he said is, he really said, I wish we could stop talking about the word ownership. He said, what we really ought to be talking about is exclusive managerial control. And this is the difference. And he said, and what he's saying is when you get a group of people, unless they have some means of making a collective decision on it, you've got, in other words, and this comes up in Butler Schaefer's book, and he said this is why it got all mercantilist in the early 20th century, because when you started selling stocks in corporations, the person who owned the company was not managing it. Right. The owners were people like us, and the managers were like the CEO and all of the chain of hierarchy.
Disconnection of principle.
And those people don't manage for the long term. They want their money now, and they manage for the short duration. And so Mises said, this is a real problem, because the managerial economy creates statism. So I guess the thing is, so how do we, who is the ultimate decision maker? I don't know if the word owning makes sense, but you see what I'm saying? Who makes the control decision of when and what to sell and how to maximize to point toward equilibrium?
So we were talking about the economic calculation problem, and now you want to talk about
and the decision making.
Are you familiar with Elinor Ostrom?
No.
Elinor Ostrom is a Nobel Prize economist, where she talks about a lot of the common pool resource groups throughout history.
She's specifically responding to the tragedy of commons written by the sociologist.
And she has actually found that a lot of these collectively owned groups, especially when were not statist, it wasn't a vertically controlled, it was a horizontal movement where everyone was volunteering to have common pool resources, manage things better than when it came under.
Oh yeah, that's what decentralization is all about.
Yeah, exactly. So to answer that question, who owns it, it doesn't necessarily have to be a single person.
So where do the resources come? Like, say you see a market need for like shoelaces. Who's the person that controls how the shoelaces are made, how the investment is made, where do they get the investment for it? Can they still collect investment money.
So we're going from economic calculation problem,
I know,
not yet resolved,
I don't mean to
exclusive
remove
managerial control to production
Well,
decisions.
there's all three of these elements.
Personally, I'd like to just hear a little more basis. I mean, I don't want to make
I don't want to make it complex, but they're all three of these things
I see
going
all your
on.
connections. I see the connections. I just the way we're not resolved one, we're kind of moving to another. And
so it's like it's really complex.
I'd like to know more about exactly where you're coming from.
Do you mind if we push this off? Okay.
I don't think you finished that.
Yeah.
We started talking a little about.
Sorry,
I do. I mean, like Dylan and I do want this to be a Q&A. You know what I mean? Like, this is the,
I'm sorry. You should finish
I'm
up
not
with
here to give a big
calculation.
presentation. Yeah.
Why don't you like just do an explanation or whatever, define the terms real quick, and then once you laid it out, whatever anyone has questions on.
Absolutely.
That
was kind of the format we were going for.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's cool. You kind of answer it as we go. All right. So capitalism. So private ownership. Private ownership of the means of trade and industry is a standard definition. We're looking at it more like there are people who have some kind of privilege or exclusive managerial control over stuff they're not using through some, it's unclear. Yeah, we're saying it's a legal privilege. But so it's not clear on why this person owns this factory and where did they get the capital for that factory. And if you trace the history of that, did they get that from the state? Did they need violence to get that capital? Did they, is a central bank loan them that money? Well, golly, that's just stolen from everyone. It's stolen property. And if they're not using the factory, then it's almost like they've abandoned it and the workers are homesteading it. It's like the guy who gets the profits, he's not doing anything here. He's just kind of like collecting a rent for what the workers are doing. And so
that's the premise, is that all control is based on getting it from state. What if the person didn't get it from the state?
We're explaining how we're seeing capitalism.
Yeah, but that's setting up a straw man to beat it down, and we agree that.
If you think you have a different meaning of capitalism,
Yeah.
that's fine. You know what I mean?
Oh,
we're talking about ours. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like,
I see.
this is how we're visioning capitalism. This is how we're approaching things. And there are other meanings of capitalism.
Oh, I see.
And I just want to disambiguate. I want to clear up
Clear up
like
what
here's
yours
where
is.
I'm
Right.
approaching. And this gives you an idea of what our problem of capitalism might be. We have this issue where it seems like historically people got privileges and they use those privileges to build capital, and they use that capital to take advantage of people who were oppressed by the state, and now they're rich based on the state's capital and their exploitation of people. So it's like they're using the historical derivatives of domination and violence to enrich themselves. And as anarchists, I'm like, I don't like that. Boo! So that's capitalism. Socialism.
Socialism, like I said earlier, socialism more or less starts with reading some of the classical economists. And some of the biggest free